Well, hey all, it is great to see you. Although I guess I don't actually see you, it's just the thing I'm used to saying, so whatever. Well, hey, we're going to jump into standard 4.2. I'm going to do it quickly because I know it's probably Friday or maybe Saturday or who knows, maybe Sunday. And you don't really want to watch a long video, so we're just going to dive right in. Today we're going to talk about the government and how the government in the 1800s impacted the factors of industry or the factors of production, okay? That's what we're talking about. Let's dive in and do it. Specifically, we'll look at how the government did that both in the antebellum period and then after the Civil War. So I want to point out that even though we're talking in this unit, and we mentioned last time that the economy grows exponentially after the Civil War, it actually is going to start to grow in the early 1800s. Our businesses are going to begin. The market revolution is going to begin. And the government actually created an environment in which businesses could grow. I want to talk about the things it did before the war and then how it sort of does even more after the war. Okay, I think it's worth pointing out that the government can impact business. It can do a lot of things to help business. It can cut taxes on businesses. It can pass a tariff. It can make labor laws that work a certain direction or don't work a certain direction. It can regulate less. Now, all those things have pros and cons, but I just want you to realize that the government can do a lot that can help business. It's also fair to point out that the government can do a lot to really mess business up, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about what it does to help. And one of the things is that it can come down and make very clear laws so that businesses have a little bit of stability. They know what to expect and how to plan. So, for example, in the early 1800s, before the Civil War, you're going to have two court cases that are going to actually help businesses know what's coming. The first one is Dartmouth versus Woodward. If you know Dartmouth, it's a college. They'd hired a guy named Woodward who they decided, as a college president, I should say, who they decide they actually want to fire. And so they try to fire him, and Woodward says, "Ha, but I signed a contract. I didn't violate the contract. Just because you don't like me doesn't mean you can fire me." And so they take this to court, and the court says, actually, he's right. This contract is binding. Until he violates it, you can't get rid of him. You say, how does that help business? Well, think about it. Businesses need to know that the contracts they sign are actually going to come through. So let's say that you're working with me and I say I'm going to, sell you, 500 pounds of thread. I think they sell them on spools of thread or whatever. I'm going to sell you 5,000 spools of thread. And I'm going to charge you, I don't know how much thread costs, 50 cents per spool of thread. Okay? And then somebody else comes along and says, actually, I'll pay you $1 for each spool of thread. Well, I really want to change my mind and trade with that guy, not with the person who's only going to give me 50 cents. But if we have signed a contract, I got to go with this guy because that's the agreement that we made. And that just allows businesses to plan. So Dartmouth versus Woodward, contracts are binding. Gibbons versus Ogden is another court case. This is going to help settle some things, okay? So just don't worry about the case for a minute. Just think about this for a minute. Let's say that both South Carolina and Georgia grow peaches, which is true. And there's a little bit of, argument about it. Like Georgia says they're the peach state. It's on their license plate. But did you know that we actually produce more peaches than Georgia does? It's true. So let's say that South Carolina gets a little upset and says, we are going to put a tariff on peaches that come in from Georgia. And Georgia says, then we'll put a tariff on South Carolina peaches. Well, now there's a question. Can we do that? Gibbons versus Ogden basically says, no, states cannot regulate commerce or trade between the states. Only the federal government can, and we're not going to put tariffs on one state over another. That's dumb. Give it a rest and go home. Okay? That's Gibbons versus Ogden. And that's settled also in the antebellum period. In the antebellum period, the government's going to pass a bunch of patent laws to protect the rights of inventors. Guys, why would anybody invent something if they don't think they're going to get some cash out of it? So like the cotton gin, boy, Mr. Whitney here with the cotton gin. Hang on one second. Sorry about that. So Eli Whitney patents the cotton gin, and he's going to get wealthy off this thing, because why in the world would he do this if he's not going to get to see some kind of economic incentive? So again, the government stepping in and doing that actually encourages people to go ahead and do things that will help everybody. We've talked about the National Bank. They're the ones who give out loans. capital, money to start businesses. They control the interest rates of those loans. And so during this period, before the Civil War, you're going to get all these early inventions, the railroad, the steamboat. We're drilling for oil during that time. So there's this perception out there that government can only hurt business, and it definitely can. But it can also help business by creating an environment where it can thrive. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about what's it going to do after the Civil War. What's the government going to do to help the economy grow? But we're going to do it in terms of the factors of production. Okay, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Sometimes we also throw in technology. But today we're only going to look at the first two. How does the government grow our land, and how does it grow our labor? First of all, we got to talk about land, though, because I say that and you're thinking about just the physical land that you build businesses or houses on or whatever. And yeah, that absolutely is land. But when we talk about land in an economic sense, we just mean natural resources, things that would exist without human intervention. So coal, gold, and oil here would all be good examples of land. So what's the government going to do to get it for us? Well, of course, we're going to buy land from other countries. We're going to buy the Louisiana Territory from France. We're going to attack Mexico over some of this. We're going to take it and sort of cheat the Indians out of it in the West. And then they want to encourage people to move into the West so we can find out what's there. We have it, but it's like we have this treasure chest and we have to open it and sort through it and see what's there. And so part of the reason for the Homestead Act, remember we talked about that, you can have the land for free if you settle on it, build a home there. The whole point of that is we want people out there so we can find out what's here, what's on this land, what further land is there. And as we do, we find coal, we find iron, we find gold, we find good soil to grow stuff on. We're going to find lots of stuff that is going to increase our wealth. And of course, that's a big part of the reason that we removed the Native Americans. They're like, hey, you guys are on our resources, get off. We want this stuff. Okay, and so by 1900, you can see this map here. We have a lot of gold mines out west. We have a number of centers of industry. The C is copper mining. The I is iron and steel mills, which we have all throughout the country. Iron ore mining, coal mining, it's all over the place. But not just mining, we're also going to realize this is great land to grow stuff on. You can see all the things we're growing here. And yeah, sure, a lot of it out west is sparsely populated or non-productive land, as it says down here in the key. But I think it's also important to realize that we have a lot of really good land too. Oh, and by the way, that junky land, a lot of it we're just going to use as Indian reservations, which is, problematic, I would say. So this might be a really good point for you to stop and in your graphic organizer, which check Google Classroom, it's asking you to think about how the United States uses land to become a superpower over time. And that's what we're going to do. We're building up our wealth so we can become a superpower. So what are we going to do? Maybe give me 2 or 3 things. Just put it down there so you can organize your thoughts, and also so I can give you a grade. How does the United States use land in order to grow its wealth? Maybe that's a better way to ask it. Okay. So we've talked about land. Let's talk about labor. Now, labor is super easy. Labor just means the workers, the people who are actually going to do the jobs in the industrial area primarily, although it could be farms too. They're going to help us get stuff made. Now, the government for a long time has tried to protect jobs in the United States. And let's not make a mistake about it. They're not just protecting jobs because they want to help the workers. They're protecting jobs because they want to make sure that people have money. If people have money, they spend it. If people spend stuff, the economy improves, right? So we got to go make more stuff. Let's back up. So let's say that I work at a company that makes washing machines. Okay, so I got a paycheck. And I'm like, cool, I got my first paycheck making washing machines. I'm going to buy stuff. And so I go to a restaurant or I get on Amazon and I, buy stuff. And Amazon and the restaurant are like, man, this new washing machine company that opened, we got all these people coming in and buying here. We need to hire a couple more dishwashers and waiters and all that stuff, servers. And so they do. Well, now the waiters and servers and dishwashers have more money, and they're like, man, I need some cash. I'm going to buy some stuff. And maybe one of the things they buy is dishwashers. So now my company has to go hire more people to make dishwashers, right? Which I know I use dishwashers in two ways, both at the restaurant and in my business. That's confusing. But so now my company's got to hire more people, and more people have cash, right? So that's good when people are at work. The tariff can actually hurt some other folks, though. It hurts people who don't necessarily have jobs. So if I'm, way off in the countryside and I don't work near industry, it could actually increase prices for me. Maybe I was buying cheap imported goods from China and the price of those things just went up. It's not great for me, okay? But it is, in this case, we're talking about how does the government help the economy. They're going to help it by passing tariffs in the 1800s that protect those jobs in industrial areas. The government's also going to make sure we have workers when those jobs are open. So let's say my factory that I work at needs some more workers. Well, if that's true across the board, the government in the late 1800s would open up our immigration policy. Think about it like a faucet, right? When we need more, we turn it on. And now immigrants start pouring into the United States and getting these jobs, and that brings in the labor that we need. And all those jobs get filled, and we're like, okay, hold on, don't need any more immigrants, and so we turn the faucet and we close it off again. That's kind of how we viewed immigration for a long time. Bring them in when there's a need. Interestingly, after the railroad is completed, we shut off the immigration for the Chinese people with a law called the Chinese Exclusion Act. We say, thanks for the railroad, and we shut off the faucet, and we don't open it again until the 1940s. No Chinese people can legally become citizens until the 1940s after the Chinese Exclusion Act, which, and that's a while we're opening immigration in other areas, other regions, and even for other groups of people in California where the Chinese are. So this is very much a racially directed law, okay? Now, bringing in all these immigrants is going to have some impacts. First of all, it's going to make it so the employers don't have to pay their people very much. So I've been working for my company for a while, and I'm upset because I don't get much time off. I'm working long hours. It's not safe where I work. The pay is bad. And so I go to my boss and I say, you pay me more or I'm going to quit. And the boss says, quit. We got all these immigrants coming in who will work for half of what you make. That's going to keep wages down for a long time. So over time, workers are going to start to organize unions. Now you see over here we have a union that's on strike. That's one thing they could do. They'd say, well, instead of just one person going and saying we'll quit, what if we all join together and we all say pay us more or we quit? The problem is for that to work, everybody's got to join a union, or most people have to join a union, and that's super controversial because you could lose your job. And in fact, as the unions begin to organize and they do go on strike, very often the government would actually send troops out to break up some of these strikes and say, we're going to put you in jail for striking. You need to be at work. So again, there's this question of who is the government trying to help? Is it the business owners as a whole, or is it the workers? And in this case, they're going to say, we want to help the owners. We want to help the management. And the reason for that is, it's not primarily the management. They want to see the economy grow. And they feel like the best way to do that is to help the management. But the workers say, well, what about us? This will lead to some real frustration. So in the late 1800s, all this growth means we start producing more than we can actually sell in the United States. We have a surplus of these goods. And so we have to start figuring out where else can we sell things, and the answer is other parts of the world. And we'll come back to that actually in Standard 5, where we're going to look for new markets. Now, I would, before you quit, I would say, okay, what about labor? How do we use labor to grow our economy, or to slowly become a superpower? That's the question, okay? There's also at the bottom, there's a chunk in there. Hang on, let me pause and look at it before I tell you that. Okay, so there's also a chunk at the bottom that says, what are some things the government specifically does in the antebellum period to grow our economy and move us toward being a superpower? And then what are some of the things we do after the Civil War, some specific government actions that help us become a superpower? So you could just say this, even though you might also say it over here with labor. You could say, well, after the Civil War, the government's going to bring in more immigrants to work jobs. That's one of the things that I would probably put there. Okay. Guys, that's pretty much it. The notes and completing this are all I need from you this Friday. So, hey, get it done. Good job. I guess we'll talk to you next time. Have a wonderful weekend, and let me know if you have any questions. See you soon.